The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Bizzong.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, the weird and wacky fiction podcast. With me, your host, Mr. Frank. What's going on, Zongers? Welcome back to the Big Bizzong Show. You knew I'd be back. You know why I'd be back? Because when you got a guest, like this week's guest, returning to Bizzong triumphantly, well, then you got to make another Bizzong Show. That's right, I'm talking about this week's guest, the one and only Mr. Lucas Milliron. And for all you godless heathens out there, this is a special show for you because we're going to be talking a lot, again, about Godless.com. And how can we not? We have Lucas Milliron on the show, who's harnessed the power of Godless. You know, Zongers, to borrow from hockey speak, right? The great Wayne Gretzky. You don't have to know a lot about hockey to know who Wayne Gretzky is. His father trained him when he played, not to be where the hockey puck was. He was trained to know and be where the puck was going to go. And that is what Lucas Milliron did with Godless.com. He had the foresight to see where the puck was going, and he put himself there. He wasn't at the play at the time. He got ahead of the play. And Lucas Milliron is reaping those benefits because right now his book, Cocksucker, which came out 2-3 years ago from Grindhouse Press, has gotten the second life, and I feel like it's almost like finally found its true audience on Godless.com. He was there early on and is reaping the benefit. Everybody's talking about Cocksucker again like it's a brand new book, and it's not. And on top of that, because of this new recognition, this newfound rekindling of the flames that is the book Cocksucker, he's also found himself as part of Drew Stepik's sort of banner flagship series for Godless.com. That's Fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell. He is going to be book number 5, titled Skin Deep. So we're going to talk all about that new book, being part of the Fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell series, and just in general working with Godless.com. And catching up with Lucas in general, because he's had a lot of time, you know, between Cocksucker and now. So we're kind of seeing all the fruits of his labor, finding out what he's been writing, and maybe get a glimpse at what he's got coming in the future. It's all right there in that Bizzong interview. So let's jump into it. The Bizzong interview. The return Bizzong interview of the one and only Mr. Lucas Milliron. Give us the gong. Zongers, it is a pleasure to welcome back to Bizzong this week a repeat guest. This is his second appearance, and it's like a whole new renaissance for this gentleman. Lots of great things have been happening for him very recently, including a new release at Godless.com. Our friends at Godless.com this week, part of the Fucking Scumbags in Hell series. Book 4, 5, I forgot what the count is. We'll catch up to it. But let's just welcome right now to the show, the one and only Mr. Lucas Milliron. Lucas, welcome back to Bizzong.
What up?
What's going on, my friend?
Damn, man, everything and nothing.
It seems like you've rekindled some fire in your writing career as Fucking Scumbags in Hell. Your title is called Skin Deep. Is it the 4th or the 5th release in the series?
It's the 5th release right now.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It was bumped up from the 6th. So it was originally going to be August 15th, but there were some issues with scheduling some of the other stories, so they bumped me up to June 15th.
Beautiful. And let's kind of just put it all together for those of the Zongers out there who really aren't sure what this Fucking Scumbag in Hell series is all about. Why don't you kind of give the general overview about what Fucking Scumbags in Hell is before we dig deeper into your offering?
Absolutely. So basically, Drew Stepik from Godless.com approached me about doing a project that he'd started called Fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell. it was originally going to be this series that he kind of coined to me as an extreme version of the Twilight Zone, kind of a Black Mirror, but for hardcore horror. And he asked me about it. He was a big fan of Cocksucker last year. He told me it was one of his favorite reads, and he said, "Hey, I want you involved in this project." So, I mean, he kind of hit me at a very serendipitous time, and I couldn't say no. It's basically follows the story of this reoccurring character named Hoop, who's kind of like this Beelzebub, Satan type character who is a reoccurring character throughout the entire series. And he told me, just come up with a story, give me a human scumbag, make it a little topical, and take this douchebag of a horrible human being and punish them. The only rule is that you have to include this universe and include the character Hoop, so that way the stories kind of interlude and connect. And ostensibly that's what I did, only it's probably my most visceral piece to date.
That's pretty interesting too. And I know early on when Drew had first started pitching this stuff that he wanted to incorporate, other writers into this world he was creating. He understood like it was bigger than, the project was bigger than the thing he could tackle himself, especially taking on Godless. So he was talking about getting people on board, seeing who would be interested. And my gut is to always, jump at offers and everything, but I didn't really understand. I mean, I don't even think the first fucking Scumbags in Hell was kind of out when he first started pitching it. So early on, when I saw you got announced pretty early on that you were going to be part of this, I really dug that. You grabbed the bull by the horns and jumped on this thing and figured it out. Now, my understanding is, for those early contributors who are now getting their stuff coming out, you did get a peek at 3 books that Drew wrote himself, right? So you got ahead of jumping onto this project, an idea of what to write. But, I guess you come in too when there's really not, much other than a little behind the scenes look at thing. What made you just jump at this really sort of odd project that you didn't have any sort of map or blueprint to know what you were taking on? What made you jump in and go for it anyway? So
I'm probably going to get the most personal that I've been on any interview that I've done so far. 'Cause I keep using the word serendipitous. So, ostensibly the way it all started was we were coming out of COVID. We were coming out of lockdown. It was the beginning of the year. Things were starting to kind of normalize a little bit. And basically 3 weeks before Drew came to me with this project, my biological father had passed away. Now, I use that term very specifically because him and I never really had much of a relationship. With me, at least, he was very abusive. He was a literal scumbag. The man had an addiction problem. The man had all kinds of issues. And when he passed, I saved a lot of letters throughout the years. All right, I kind of got to start over here. So my father had passed away. I don't have much of a relationship with that man. When I was 12 years old, he had actually kidnapped me. And we basically, as soon as my mom got me back, he gave me an option of never seeing him again, so I told him no. All right. Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because I really got to go deep. So my biological father passes away. I hadn't had much of a relationship with this guy. I had kept a lot of letters from when he would try to write me and stuff. There's a whole slew of things. He's got a letter that he had sent me when he was in rehab. And that was basically his whole history about, his trail through addiction. I saved all this stuff specifically so I could read it when he passed away. Now, to give you an idea of what kind of human being this person was, he was 3 years behind on child support to pay for me growing up. One visitation, I go down to see him, And he's living with this other woman, Clara, who is his now ex-wife, but he was living with her at the time, her daughter and her son. Well, her son had a terminal brain cancer and was dying. And here I am, a 10-year-old boy who's supposed to be spending time with his father, hanging out with this kid who's basically on life support, dying with a brain tumor. My dad worked 3 jobs to pay for that kid's medical supplies, to pay for that kid's, medicines, doctor's visits. And like I said before, he was 3 years back in child support. Well, it turns out the reason that he was doing all of that was because behind his ex-wife's back, he was stealing the kid's morphine. Mm. And that's on the lighter end of the fucked up shit he was doing with me. I mean, it goes way back. I mean, with me, he was physically abusive, mentally abusive. And I'm still processing this now, how I'm dealing with it. And it's a tough one. So after he passed away and I went through all the stuff, I hit a brick wall with all of my writing. Like, I was at a standstill. I was literally days away from stopping writing because nothing was coming. I mean, since I released my first book, The Chattering, I have written at least 100 words every day. The Chattering came out, I think, in 2016. So for the past 5 years, I have written every day. And for almost 2 weeks, I didn't write a word. And then I get an email from Drew. I'm trying to do stuff behind the scenes to actually keep myself motivated writing-wise. I told him, hey, I want to be a part of Godless. He says, yes, you've already got an account. I loved Cocksucker. By the way, there's this project I would love for you to be involved in. He sends me some stuff. I kind of go through it. My first draft was just god-awful. Like, I wrote something and it made no sense. He went back to me and said, watch this movie. It's called Angel Heart. This was really the thing that inspired the whole thing that I'm doing. So I watch Angel Heart because I'd seen it, but I'd only seen it like once, long time ago. And if anybody hasn't seen that movie, I highly recommend watch it and rewatch it because it's a really good movie. And then all of a sudden it clicks. And then I have to figure out what I'm going to write. And I told myself, if I'm going to write something for Scumbags Burn in Hell, I need to write what I'm most afraid of. And for me, what I've always been most afraid of is turning into my biological father. That's where Skin Deep comes from. And a lot of the stuff that's involved in that story, as far as some of the trauma that the main character, Dr. Irvin, goes through or has gone through in his past, a lot of that's true. And I don't want to spoil it for people, but there are several scenes that are no joke. They're taken from reality. And I don't want to spoil it, and I don't want to throw out and make people think one way or the other about it, because it is a really disturbed story. It's fucked up. But this was my therapy. This is what got me going again. And since I got this story, I mean, usually a 20,000 word kind of novelette usually takes me about 2 months. I plowed through 17,000 words in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Like finished words. This story just erupted from me. And I couldn't stop thinking about it the entire time I was writing it. I keep going back to visceral because that's what it felt like. And it still does. And I'm not going to lie, because of how personal it is, I'm still a little tepid about it being out, because there's a lot of me on the page there, but it needs to happen. I mean, everything about it was just the timing was too convenient. I mean, here I was the day before contemplating quitting, and I'm just like, no, I'll just put something out there just to check. And then Drew gets back to me, and then the original release date was August 15th, which is my birthday. And I'm like, all right, no, this has to happen. And I am beyond ecstatic that it did, because this kept me writing, and this got me back into the industry, hands down.
Was it when Drew approached you? Did you feel like? Did you know at that point, sort of maybe in your gut, not necessarily at that point, like this is the perfect time for me to tackle, that issue that I have that's festering in me now, or
Oh, absolutely not. I was a wreck.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I was just going out, just throwing it out there like a zombie, just like, I'm probably going to get rejected. Nobody's going to hear back from me, because COVID was not kind to my writing career.
Uh-huh.
I had a few book offers that were kind of marinating, and I was talking to publishers, and I'm not going to use names because, I mean, obviously everybody was hit badly, but all of the book deals that I was working on fell through. And there were 3 different books that I'm now searching for homes for. And like I said, I was literally just, the first draft, I was just phoning it in because I didn't know what to do. And then for whatever reason, between him giving me the 3 parts that he had written to say, well, here's some inspiration, and then watch this other movie, it's between all 3 of that, I finally understood what he was talking about and what he was getting.
Yeah.
And it's a weird concept, because you say, oh, it's Twilight Zone for extreme horror, but it is and it isn't.
Right.
And once you start getting into it, once you get to book 2 and you see how the thing has legs, it all makes sense. And I really don't want to spoil it for people who've not started the Scumbags Burn in Hell project yet. I want people to read it. And I mean, once I got through all that, that's when it hit me. And that's when I realized this is what my problem is that I was so focused on the individual that had harmed me as a child that I forgot I grew up without that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then this gave me the opportunity to deal with things the way that I've always dealt with them. Because when depression hits you, it's a motherfucker. And you have to sometimes just be creative in how you deal with that stuff. And I've always been a cathartic writer. If anybody's read the story Becoming, that also has one very cathartic moment. In high school, I'd at one point even contemplated suicide. So I wrote out what would happen if I'd killed myself. Like, I literally wrote a story with my name saying, well, here I am doing this, this, and this. And what stopped me was I just didn't like the ending. And I didn't want to throw that little story away, so I just kind of tucked it in one of my notebooks. And when I wrote Becoming and I wrote a character that was loosely based on myself, I had to include that. And I did. And the same thing with Timmy Less. I mean, Timmy Less is still, now it's the second most cathartic story I've ever written, because Timmy Less deals with the repressed memories that I'd suffered or I'd induced upon myself after dealing with my biological father as a child. Because it's really hard to explain in one sentence what repressed memories feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always explained it like the way Guillermo del Toro explains horror movies, that there's 2 kinds of scary movies. There's tag and there's hide and seek. Everybody loves tag. That's Jason, that's Freddy, that's, Scream, all those slashers that jump out and get you. But hide and seek is like Alien. It's like The Others. It's where you can hear it, you can smell it, you can feel whatever it is breathing down the back of your neck, but you can't touch it. And when you don't remember the things that harmed you as a young child, as a young man, and something happens that triggers that, it's really hard to explain the emotional trauma you're, releasing from all this. So Tim was my way of dealing with it, putting into words what exactly it was I was feeling. And again, the timing with all of this was just too perfect for me to say no. And then when the idea finally hit me, it was just all hands on deck, and I just didn't stop until I was done.
That's pretty, it's intense. And I think sometimes, even I kind of forget that, you're best known for Cocksucker for a lot of reasons.
Oh, totally.
And that's the more, I hesitate to say lighthearted, but it's the funner of your stories. And people may not realize or forget that really outside of Cocksucker, everything else you have is pretty deep and dark. You know, maybe prismatic words isn't quite that, but you know,
it has it. It definitely has its moments. I mean, because it's a short story collection, it spans the gamut of all my skill set.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a short story in there called Chunky, which is just the total fucking gross out. I mean, I've got a furry story in fucking prismatic words.
So yeah, like, I mean that runs. Yeah. I mean, that may be like, you know, the best thing for people to get an idea of like your range, because that's where you show off your range. But yeah, by and large, I think that you know, you tend to be darker, more introspective, less or more serious. Let's say less serious, more serious. You know, in general in your work than what Cocksucker necessarily. You know, it's not a departure, but it's a different thing from your
caveat.
Yeah. So
it's a caveat.
I'm wondering if at all, like, you know, as far as receiving this book now, because especially with Godless, everybody pretty much knows Lucas as the cocksucker guy, and you're going to come at him, you know, with the skin deep. That's really deep, really dark stuff, really, you know, personal stuff. Was there any concern about you presenting yourself that way, or because you know what your stuff is like, oh
yeah,
you're like, no, this is more me than what Cocksucker is like. So how do you know, see all that?
Well, because like I said, I float all over the place. I mean, last time we talked, I was telling you I want to do a children's book, and I still do.
Yes,
that's on my list of things to do. I mean, I will write whatever the fuck I want to write, and people who enjoy my style, my hope is that they're just going to be along for the ride. I mean, that's pretty much it. I write what I write what comes from my heart. I mean, Cocksucker, I tell everybody, oh, that was a one-off, but I can't lie. That was so much fun writing. I mean, just being as gross and dirty and just slapstick silly. I mean, I've got a couple other, what I'm calling my Florida Man series. I've got at least 2 or 3 stories, and I have a short story that'll eventually come out, hopefully in December. I can't talk about it yet because they're still working on that series, but I do have another Florida Man type story that's coming out. And then I actually do have plans to write a sequel to Cocksucker 2, The Hunt for Neutered Bob.
I mean, that sounds like fun, but that is definitely sounds to me it's like, again, I'm going to write what I want to write.
Exactly. I mean, look at Armand. I mean, I consider myself a good friend. He's a good friend of mine. Whether or not he feels that way about me, I'm hoping he does. But I love Armand to death, and that man has a huge spectrum of the type of stuff he writes. I mean, the same guy who wrote Dying Days wrote, you know, A View from My Seat, a baseball nonfiction story.
He don't give a fuck.
No, and I admire that.
Yeah.
I mean even
it's
people
risky.
like Brian Keene. Yeah, everybody has those things. They write stuff that's not necessarily to market. It's what they feel in their heart.
Yes.
My favorite author of all time, Clive Barker. I mean, the man wrote Hellraiser, but he also wrote Thief of Always.
Yes. Which
is YA. I mean, straight up YA.
It's my personal favorite book of all time, Thief of Always. 100%.
Oh my God. It is, I mean, my first delve into Clive Barker was Damnation Game. And I read that book before I even knew Hellraiser had a novel.
Yeah.
And then hearing that, Hellraiser, the Hellbound Heart is still my favorite book of all time. Just Hellbound Heart. That introduction just told me this is what, I mean, not that I'm going to copy this, but this is what I need to do with every introduction I write. I need to set the tone. I need to set the atmosphere in that one sentence. And the way Clive does it, so intent was Frank upon solving the puzzle of the Le Marchand's box that he didn't hear the great bell begin to ring. I mean, that sets the entire story of like, oh shit.
Yeah, those opening lines, right?
And don't get me wrong, Cocksucker has a very set the tone introduction. And so does Timmy Less. And so does Becoming. And so does everything else I write. And to me, that's the way to tell the audience which side of my writing style they're getting. Is to tell you right up front. I mean, especially with a book as volatile as Cocksucker.
Right.
I mean, just the title alone is a trigger warning.
You would think.
Sometimes you would think.
You would think.
I mean, if you ask my 1-star reviews. But either way, I want people to know up front, hey, this is what the book you're getting into is. Buckle up.
Right. And I guess the same obviously goes for Skin Deep as well. I mean, do you, when you write those, when you sit down and write a new book, how much do you dwell on that opening line?
Depends on the project. When I did Tim E. Less, I started off with, are you fucking kidding me, or something like that. It's, the fuck I can't is the first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Cocksucker is Abigail could taste the blood on her brother's foreskin.
Uh-huh.
I mean, all of these types of stuff, they have.
It's great opening.
It just depends on the type of book.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a satanic kaiju story that I'm working on now that's got a different introduction because it's not as punch you in the face, but that's because this particular style book doesn't call for that punch you in the face. It's more of an action sequence opening. So it really depends on the project that I'm working on, how much I dwell on the introduction. Cocksucker, I didn't take 2-second hesitation. I just sat at the keyboard and that was the first thing that came out.
Now, that's, like you said, that sets it up perfect. Abigail could taste, what was it? Taste the cum on her.
Taste the blood on her
blood.
brother. Taste the blood on her brother's foreskin.
On her brother's foreskin. When you type that line, do you even know what the book is yet?
Yes. The book had a title. The book had a premise. In that situation, yes.
Okay. When you typed that line, did you know everything else about what revolved around that line in that moment, in that scene?
I knew half the story because Cocksucker is 2 stories. It's, Clive and Cooter, his pet chupacabra,
right? And
then there's Freddie and Winston, and Freddie's boyfriend and his sister's boyfriend. And I knew Clive and Cooter's story, but because I was telling the story from the other half of the story from an LGBTQ standpoint, I wanted to really take my time and do that part of the story right.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a very sensitive subject. I am not myself homosexual, but I am writing from a homosexual perspective. And my aim is to write this like any other fucking human being. People are people, end of fucking story. Love is love. I don't care if you're a man or a woman or, someone with 3 tits or 1. Everybody is different and it should be treated as such. So I really didn't have Freddie's story down until I wrote all the gross stuff. And then I went back through edits and through editors and really massaged that half of the story until I was comfortable and I thought it would stand up on its own without the rest of Cocksucker.
Pretty interesting. Just to kind of circle back a little bit to the opening lines as well. I mean, you have your, opening line to Cocksucker writ to memory. Is that the same of all your books? Do you know how each of your books you can recall the opening line to each one?
Yes and no. I mean, I can kind of vaguely remember the chattering, Becoming. It's been so long since I've looked at that one for edits, and I'm kind of purposely taking a break from that one because I'm working on finishing that series in the background. Which I know it doesn't make any sense, but it's because that is a whole multifaceted series.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to make sure that each part of the series is its own standalone kind of fractal.
Right.
That when you put all the puzzle pieces together, they all are this one juggernaut of a book.
Interesting.
But almost everything else, if you ask me, I can almost riddle off all my main novels with the opening sentences. Almost.
That's great. I mean, I love just memorable, and they're so sort of just rough, right? You never. I don't dwell much on my own stuff as far as opening lines. I try to do something, but I don't really try to go for a punch, the way you get it. And but I just started reading a Jessica McHugh, Train Derails in Boston, and the opening line is something to the effect of, vodka is a shitty navigator. I'm like, motherfuck, that's a fucking great way to open a
yes, it is.
Motherfuck. And it it just takes off from there. And great punchy opening lines like that are great. And I admire people who, it sounds to me like, there's not much dwelling for you. There's just something in the gut that comes out and you get those great lines and you don't, sit there and spend a day, a couple of weeks figuring out how to make that line perfect. It just sort of, you feel like it comes natural for you.
Yeah. The longest I've ever spent on an opening line is maybe an hour. And again, it depends on what I'm writing. Like, the problem that I have is that extreme writing just comes second nature. When I was doing for the Rope Burns anthology by Death's Head Press, when I was writing my story for that one, which it's no longer called Rope Burns, it got switched to Obligatory Voluptuous, something like that, thanks to fucking Amazon. I mean, I knew that was going to be my homage to Clive Barker. I knew that was going to be a really fucked up character. So my opening line with that one just kind of hit me. And then I get something like Becoming. I think I actually strained a little bit longer with Becoming because it's got this framework story from the beginning and the ending. So the actual opening I'd written after I'd started writing the initial story, because the framework came after I wrote the entire book.
Interesting.
So again, it really depends on the project that I'm working on, and it depends on how extreme it is. Yeah. Because I guess just the extreme shit just comes second nature.
It's helpful. How would you categorize Skin Deep as far as, I mean, did you really aim for, because when we talk Godless, and it's not necessarily dedicated to it, but, tends to be extreme horror. Did you aim for it that way, or was it just, you're writing out your fucking heart and soul on that one, so maybe it's extreme, and maybe it's not extreme. So how do you categorize, the feel of it?
It's as people won't believe me, but I pulled back on Skin Deep. And people are not going to believe me, but I did. I pulled back. And that one wasn't intentional. That was just me literally almost slitting my throat, bleeding on the page. And I'm expecting 1-star reviews from that one just because I know how hardcore I put my own personal self into it. And I do that so that way when I start getting those stories that people say, oh, I'm telling a terrible story, or this is, belligerent or whatever, I'm preparing myself for that, because I know when you hold something super personal and you get those negative feedback, it's hard not to take it personal. So with that one, I didn't intend for it to be as bad as it was, or as visceral as it turned out to be. And I honestly tried to take some of the stuff out. And I know Drew's going to listen to this and be like, how bad was it?
Yeah, I mean, there's the other thing too, is, you're being this visceral on the page. You're talking, it's around 20,000 words. So writing this thing, like, you're offering up something that's going to be sold for essentially, I think it's 50 cents, right? 50 cents. So, there's that effort there, but to me, it's like, I almost feel embarrassed to ask you this thing, because like, you were pouring your heart out, and like, you had a greater purpose, and the 50 cents be damned. It sort of sounds like to me, but was there sort of anything in the back of your mind, like how much effort I want to put into this? Was there a word count target that Drew's looking for? Because to me, 20,000 words seems kind of high for, I think his, the earlier ones are pretty short. So I don't really know what the word counts are. So what was that whole process of, to bring the business end of things into things?
Well, to put the business end in things, he said 20,000 was the cap, nothing more than 20,000.
Okay.
And with me, I have a habit of writing, whether or not it's intentional, it just ends up happening. When I start to finish, I almost always stop right on the money. But with this project, I think I stopped at around 17,000 words. And I know it's for 50 cents, and I know it's this and that, but at the same time, if I'd written a 10,000 word short story that I submit to Cemetery Dance, and they're going to give me a decent check, but I'm only making that payment once. Yeah. They're going to sell it, recoup their profit, and then keep the rest. The way I look at this is it's a 50-cent book, but I'm keeping the proceeds of this from start to finish, and I get to call this my business card.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I looked at it, because regardless, this story would have come out. I mean, whether it came out through Godless, I mean, I feel like Godless was the catalyst for this story coming out as quickly as it did. But I'm sure at some point, whether now or whether 10 years from now, this would have come out of me.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know what happened. There was just some kind of magic in the air that it had to come out the way that it did.
I mean, when you say serendipitous, it sure sounds that way to me. And I can totally appreciate, like, you know, like I said, again, business side be damned. But, you know, hindsight being 2020, I mean, watching the way Godless has grown in such a short time, you know, obviously you jumped on the bandwagon very early. You got Cocksucker up on their site early, and you had some great success with it too. And now, you know, we're starting to see the fruits of being part of fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell, you know, being part of that series. It's almost a flagship series for, you know, the platform for Godless. So, I mean, 50 cents, you know, it seems small, but this is not, you know, for people who don't know, this is not Amazon. You're not splitting 70-30, 50-50. You're getting 50 cents of every sale. And that could be big because, I mean, Godless's user base is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's just amazing. Well, the user base they have is voracious.
Well, and here's another thing to throw business end wise. If you look at Amazon Books and you buy a book for 99 cents on Amazon, what a lot of the readers don't understand is that a 99-cent book, the author is only making 35% of that book.
Yeah.
So if you buy a 99-cent book from Amazon,
30
the
cents.
author, 35 at most.
Yeah. Yep.
So the fact that Drew says we get to keep the full 50-cent profit margin on that.
Yeah.
It's
humongous.
It's still it makes more business sense than selling a 99-cent book on Amazon.
It is humongous. I stepped in when I put Scared Silly up on Godless. You know, I got it out of KDP, got it out of all that bullshit. I said, this is what I'm gonna, you know, give my support to Drew and give him the story. And I put it up for 89 cents, knowing I would get 90% return on that. So for every book I sell for 10 cents less than I have for the last 6 years or 7 years that book was on Amazon, at 89 cents, I get 80 cents of that, which is, like you said, that's actually 50 cents more. I get 3 times the amount back on every, like, it just makes all the sense in the world. And it's paid off very well for me, you know, to do that pricing scheme. And, I mean, let's get into it now. I wanted to talk about this because Cocksucker, when you put it on Godless, it seemed to, like, not that it did bad at all, and it did great when it came, but it's been quiet for a while, and I don't know how you would categorize this, but to me, I say it's finally found its audience. Again, not to say that it tanked or anything when you first, but it is more popular than ever right now on Godless. Are you feeling that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but then again, look at the timing. I released it in Women of Horrors Month in February.
Yeah.
You know, of 2019. And it was the last Women's in Horror Month that was going to be in February. So, not that I'm complaining that my story got drowned out, but that's just what was going to happen. Because I can't really shoot or promote something when other people who are marginalized are also trying to get their voices heard. I saw it as inappropriate of me to really hardcore push a story during Women of Horror Months. And I was going to really try to ramp it up in March. And then COVID happened. I mean, last year, March, I had actually planned with 3 other horror writers a small book tour going up and down the east coast of Florida. Not that I'm necessarily saying I'm copying Armand, but I may slightly have copied Armand's Beers and Fears.
No, don't say that. Don't.
It's not called Beers and Fears. I absolutely swore to Armand, me doing a book tour at breweries would not be called Beers and Fears because, yes, that is Armand's baby. He owns it. And every time I go, I give homage to the dudes in Jersey.
There you go. If there's one thing I know is you do not say, if you want to make somebody mad, if you want to see somebody mad at their maddest and catch hell's fury, you would tell Armand, I'm going to do Beers and Fears also. And then it's over for you, son.
Oh, absolutely. We had this whole thing. It was a Beers and Fears-esque. We called it Books and Brews.
Uh-huh.
The Florida Horror Tour.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to do, like I said, I had 6 breweries basically on board and scheduled. And then we did one book signing the weekend before March 13th.
Mm-hmm.
And it saw scant numbers of people because that was when the nerves were kicking in and everybody was like a little wishy-washy about going out.
Sure, we should be around people tonight.
And then March 13th happened and everything was canceled and dropped.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And at some point, we're going to bring that back. We're going to do another Books and Brews tour, the Florida Horror Tour. It's going to come back eventually. It's just, I'm waiting for things to be a little bit more normal than they are now. So that way we can hopefully get some real butts in seats and, talk books, talk horror.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to circle back now. I still want to circle back to the Cocksucker ostensibly finding its audience, quote unquote, on Godless. Again, you said, when it did first come out, it came out sort of unfortunate timing, but it did have, the name Cocksucker grabs people's attention.
Totally.
But to me, like, with Godless, people seem to gravitate towards that book more than ever, and it's been getting more praise than ever. And you've got to be feeling that.
Absolutely. The hardest part about Cocksucker wasn't writing it. It's marketing that book. Because there is not a single platform on the internet that I could find aside from possibly Pornhub that would allow me to put an advertisement slot for this. I found a couple podcasts that were willing and money talks.
Yeah.
But it's just so hard. Like, you can't do a BookBub ad when the title has a swear word on it.
Yeah.
And I'm terrified of doing any kind of advertisement on Amazon because I don't know how that book skirted by, but so far it's skirting by without any incident.
Amazon's weird. I know there's so many books that have like cursing or sort of colorful language in their title. Yeah,
profane title.
I've gone in and reviewed some books that have that sort of title, and when my review says, and this is a great book, Cocksucker, and then like 2 days later, like, oh, we couldn't do your review because it contains. I'm like, what? And it's like, well, you'll sell the book, no problem, but I can't use the title of the book in my, like, that's crazy. But whatever, it is what it is. That's what Amazon's algorithms do. It's not like some guy sitting there doing that. It's just an algorithm thing. But at least you can still get that platform for now. Was there, when you went to Godless, was that sort of part of your worry? Like, this could come down at any second if somebody picks up on something or if an algorithm changes and it gets flagged?
Well, the motivators for me wanting to get on it, because once I heard they were the only source where you could reasonably get Mother Maggot, I'm like, oh shit,
yes.
This is where I have to put my book.
Yes, indeed.
To be honest, that was the thing that said, all right, if this has a platform, I know my book is safe. And right now, the only other thing that concerns me about Cocksucker is my professional life outside of books. Because I am a licensed optician in the state of Florida, and I am pursuing parts of that career on top of the book writing. And I'm noticing some interesting journeys ahead where I have to balance being both the guy who wrote a book titled Cocksucker and then as well be a representative of the professional opticians of Florida. So now I'm going to have to be the guy wearing 2 hats, and now I'm going to have to find a way to separate the two and make sure everything is within balance. Because it is a strange new world ahead of us.
I know maybe people don't know this. At one point, I guess you had a coworker sort of read the book, and you like did a little video. It was like a promotional thing, a reaction video. And
she was a friend. More than coworker, she was a good friend, and she was someone I trusted, and it was with other friends, and it was in a certain little spot, and we made sure that it wasn't, anywhere that patients were in view and you could tell what kind of office we were in. It was its own little thing.
Yeah.
And the way we did it was quiet and quaint, and it worked.
Right.
And now that I'm moving on into the industry, for opticianry, it's going to become more and more of a, I don't want to say a problem, but it'll be an obstacle that I will have to work around.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a manager who asked me recently, well, why don't you use a pen name?
Yeah.
And my first response was, well, we're kind of late for that, number one.
Uh-huh.
And number two, my biggest problem is vanity. It's pride.
Mm-hmm.
When I write something, I want people to know who did it.
Put
Whether
your
it's
name on
good,
it.
whether it's bad, I want people to know it's me because this is me. Both the good, the bad, the wicked, the silly, the gross, all of it. And like I say, I will write whatever the fuck I want to write.
Yeah. You think
And
that
it's
tune
just-
might change if there is ever any in you know, your more professional life? Not to say that the writing isn't professional, but you know, should something come up, should some obstacle come in your way because somebody takes umbrage to, well, you know, my eye doctor has a book out called Cocksucker, and I don't think I can, you know, that
Well,
sort of, you know, situation where it may
because-
cost you, you know, a
Yes
job
and no.
or an advance.
Well, oh, absolutely. I mean, at the same time, I look at it as I am not a medical doctor. I am just the pharmacist for said doctor.
Right.
So people coming to me don't necessarily see me as, oh, hey, doc. It's, oh, hey, guy, you're selling me glasses. All
Yeah.
right. So that aspect of it is fine. It's just representing the industry when I'm going to other, you know, lens manufacturers and stuff like that. It's just I'm really going to have to put a dividing barrier between the writer side and the professional optician side.
Mm.
And that's something in the next coming months that I'm really going to harp people on, especially friends, especially people in the writing industry. Look, yes, you'll see 2 Facebooks, but I'm sorry, I'm not adding you on thebeardedoptician.com
Right.
because that is work me. This is writing me.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the main thing. And people who say, well, you wrote this book. And I'm like, oh, so did you read it?
Yeah.
If
So
you didn't,
you're not entirely worried about it. I know.
Yeah.
Similarly for me, because I do not write under a pen name, and I try to keep my writing separate from my professional life. You know, I don't really promote myself at work amongst my coworkers at all. And I also don't work with the public directly like you do. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's not huge concern there for my stuff. I don't have a book called Cocksucker.
Mhm.
But I know the one
Yeah.
thing for me was like LinkedIn, where people
Mhm.
in my professional life, if there's one thing they're going to look at, it would be my LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
And I've been careful to keep my writing stuff off of LinkedIn, and I don't
Same
know
here.
why. You know, it's just
Yeah.
again, I don't have necessarily the hurdles you do with like book titles or anything, but you know, I still write, you know, the scary books, which some people take umbrage with. But I would imagine, yeah, that's where you need to be guarded the most. You think with LinkedIn?
Exactly. I mean, LinkedIn, and at some point I'm going to end up having 2 websites. I'll have my author page and then I'll have my opticianry page, as well as the multiple social media accounts. I mean, like I said, it's really putting a dividing line. And then the other thing that I've intentionally done is stories that are, I mean, again, definitely more vulgar, like Cocksucker. The ending of the book and the moral of the stories are much, much more pure. Like, for those of you who haven't read Cocksucker, there's a happy ending at the very end of the book. It's a happy ending. If you've read Timmy Less, you know that is not a happy ending. And that's intentional.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I write the book, the way I craft those stories, it sounds like a man smoking a lot of crystal meth, but they're very planned out. I mean, as far as like through the edits, through, you know, massaging the story for more detail and the way that I craft it through the editing process, they're very planned out at that point because I know that I want to have a positive message, even if it's as gross and grisly as possible, because that's what reminds you this is comedy. It's just for fun.
I mean, I 100% agree. I know where you're coming from on that. Just to move forward a little bit, you kind of teased, like, you know, obviously you had plans for COVID that got canceled like so many others, but now we're coming out on the other side, lots of relaxation. Do you have plans, anything set to start, you know, getting back out there? Any conventions? Are you going to make a more serious
Absolutely.
push to make appearances?
So the only planned appearance I have this year is Scares That Care, which from 2018 to until I die, as long as they're having it, I'm going to get my ass to Scares That Care every year.
Mm-hmm.
That is my convention. Other conventions I'll work on as we go. I do have some releases coming out. I mean, aside from just the fucking scumbags burn in hell, I do have a story in Gorefest coming out by Evil Cookie Press.
Beautiful.
My short story Infested. I wiggled my way in there with a gross cockroach story.
Great. That sounds awesome.
And that's going to be so much fun. That was another fun one to write. I mean, that has a good balance of serious horror and grossness. And I will hopefully have another release. We're expecting in December, and I can't talk about it much more than that, but keep an ear out for that towards the end of the year. And I do have another book, currently with a publisher waiting for review. So I'm hoping for good things on that one.
That sounds good. So is there any action on the longer stuff? We're going to see it more toward the end of the year.
At the moment, yeah. I mean, I actually have, I've got 5 books finished that need homes.
Okay.
2 of them are still knee deep in edits. 3 of them are finished. 1 is currently in review, and the other 2 I'm just waiting for open submissions.
That sounds great. So, you know, it sounds to me like your writing drought is over. Did Skin Deep and just bleeding on the page get you out of that funk?
It definitely helped. I mean, once I finished Skin Deep, I went back and I massaged some edits on a couple other books, and I really do think that got the gears lubricated. I mean, most of the books were already finished before all of the crazy drama with, you know, the passing of my biological father. Most of those were already finished. 3 of these books have been finished since last year, and those were the books that I'm still looking for homes for. Mm-hmm. But as of right now, I'm working on my Satanic Kaiju. I'm working on a ghost story where ghosts are a metaphor for depression. I've got my COVID story, because I feel like everybody's going to write a COVID story. I'm just letting that one simmer before I jump back into it. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, at any given time, I'm usually writing 27 different books.
I got to ask you too, since you're shopping books around the market, how are you finding the horror market right now? Do you think it's robust, or do you think it's sort of shrank up maybe due to COVID?
Well, when COVID started, first everybody panicked and stopped writing and stopped taking submissions. And then once everybody started giving out free books, all of a sudden everybody is starved for content because they've just given away their entire catalog.
Yeah.
And now I think we're at a point where I don't think it's going to be at a lull. I just think everybody's still digesting all the stories that they received coming out of COVID. Mm-hmm. So I'm waiting more for 2022 to see the market and what it does then. Mm-hmm. I mean, because horror always does better under Republican president. I don't know why, but the horror genre thrives under Republicans. And I think it's just because people are pissed off and have things to say. And now that we have a Democrat president, it's not that we don't have things to say, but I think the attention has shifted. And there's stuff that I'm trying to keep my ear to the ground on, and I'm just trying to wait and see how publishers react to future trials and tribulations.
Uh-huh. And how about self-publishing? Is that on the table at all for you?
Yes and no. The only reason I haven't self-published all 3 of those books right now comes right down to money. I mean, covers are kind of expensive. I format my own books, so I save money there. Editing is astronomically expensive if you have, you know, a thick book.
Even if you have a thin book. And
even if you have a thin book, but one of my books is over 60,000 words, and getting that book edited professionally, it's not cheap.
No, not at all.
And Timmy Less was a 90,000 word book, and that was very expensive, and that was a hard lesson in self-publishing. Uh-huh. And that's kind of how I'm taking it right now, is if I have money to do it, I would absolutely do it. But right now, I'm still recovering from last year, still trying to get stuff situated. It's just, right now I can afford to submit to free submission publishers, and that's about it.
Understood. Completely understand that stance. I definitely get it. Being a self-published author, I understand the cost and trying to find ways to
put out because you want to put out a good quality book.
Yeah.
And to put out a really good quality book is not cheap, nor should it be.
No. Because
you want people to have a good finished product, and you want to be able to say, hey, I worked and did X, Y, and Z to get this to happen. Mm-hmm. To me, again, it goes back to pride. If I'm going to put something out, I want to be proud of it.
And I mean, I can't argue at all with you there. I definitely know the feeling. And, I've stated my goal for, 2021 is to, I have two things now that, one's ready to shop around, and another needs some editing before it starts getting shopped around. But I have two things written that I'm holding back. I am not going to self-publish. And obviously money is part of the reason, but I think audience reach too is something I'm seeking, a sort of wider audience than I can get for myself self-publishing.
Getting Cocksucker through Grindhouse Press was a godsend.
I can only imagine. Yeah, that was a huge win.
Oh yeah, I mean, I cannot underestimate how having a good publisher behind you helps. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't hurt to self-publish, but there is definitely something to be said about having, other people drumming up your work behind you. And I have to give, CV Hunt and Andy at Grindhouse Press all the love in the world, because they really helped me get, not just Cocksucker, but all the other stuff behind it because of that attention.
And I mean, I guess the key too, when you are seeking, working with a publisher, to me, in my mind, it's patience. You have that, that carrot of I can get my stuff out immediately if I do it myself. But you have to be patient because, working with a Grindhouse or an Evil Cookie, they can accept your story tomorrow, but it may take a year or 2 years before that story ever sees the light of day. And that's,
absolutely.
I can only imagine that's frustrating, but, when you believe in what they're going to do for your book, I guess it makes it easier.
Yeah. Like when I submitted a story to, Tor, when Tor opened up for Nightfire, their horror inline press.
Yeah.
Oh, I waited 10 months to get a rejection letter.
Yeah.
And I wasn't surprised. But when for readers to see how the sausage is made.
Right.
10 months just waiting to get a yes or a no.
It's a long time.
And then it'll be another year to 2 years to get your edits, to get your beta readers, to get your sympathy readers, and then to go through cover art, and then to go through formatting. It's to go through a publisher, especially if it's a big publisher. It, like you said, it is patience. It's a long wait. And your only hope is at the end it pays off, because this is entertainment.
Yep.
People's minds can change from one day to another, and you're just, shooting for the moon and hoping it's going to be in the same spot next year.
Yeah. And I mean, the only thing you can do is to keep writing. But on the same token,
exactly,
like you said, you get 10 months for a response. If it's a yes, then it could be another 10 months through, editing and all that. And by the time it gets back to you, you're like, I don't remember anything at all about this book. I'm like 3 or 4 books deep, after writing this book. So you almost have to relearn the book to go through.
Oh, totally. And especially when it's something cathartic like I do, I have to get my headspace right back into where I was at writing the book.
Yeah.
And that's why, if I'd done Skin Deep at any other time in my life, it would not be the same book. It would be definitely a much more toned down version, but it just, I don't know if it would be the same quality.
Right.
Just because, you have to get your head right back into that same space, and I don't know if I would ever want to do that again.
It's got to be tough, and at least, it sounds to me, the word you use, serendipitous, it sounds like it was meant to happen at that time through Godless with Drew. It was all meant to be. I do want to correct. I don't know if I made it sound like the book is not out right now. I don't know. Is it necessarily available for pre-sale? But it'll be not released in July, correct?
July 15th.
July 15th.
1 month.
Right. But you can go to Godless right now, and it's all set up. Like, I didn't know if it was a pre-sale or not, but it's
Not
ready
yet.
to go.
Start from the beginning, because there's a whole thing with these books. I mean, the first season, you want to start straight from the beginning.
Yes.
I mean, you've got a month to read basically 4 stories. You've got Karen coming out in a couple of days from the recording of this podcast. Karen should probably be out by, June 15th?
Mm-hmm.
You definitely want to read that one. That one's going to be a load of fun. You definitely want to read Drew's other 3 stories to get you right into that atmosphere and get that palate cleanser that is Skin Deep.
Get yourself ready and set for it. All those stories, and I think is it the first 2 are free?
I believe the first one. I don't know about the second one.
Okay.
I know it was for a little bit, but I don't think it's free anymore.
Okay. But you can jump in definitely into the series for free with oh man, I can't even remember the country. A little bit country. Great story. I read it myself. It definitely sets up.
And that one has an audiobook too. There's an audio version of that available online. I'd have to look it up, but it does exist.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, great things going on over there at Godless. So much stuff going on. I'm glad to see that you're a part of it. I'm glad to see that Godless's audience is your audience. They are voracious for your work. And now we all get to look forward to Skin Deep being part of fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell. And, are there plans, at least for Godless, because you're working with publishers or anything? So I guess you don't know necessarily what might be on the horizon working directly with Godless in the future here?
I do have some ideas, and I do have to talk to Drew about it. I have one book that's been kind of sitting in the back marinating. If it doesn't look like there's a publishing deal in prospects with the one that I have now, it's definitely going to go up as a Godless exclusive.
Beautiful.
I just have to see what's going on. That's why I don't have any details about it yet. But I do have some plans to send Drew some stuff once I get everything else ironed out, now that I've got the juices going again.
That sounds awesome. I mean, you're right at home at Godless.com. If anybody hasn't gotten Cocksucker while waiting for Skin Deep, grab Cocksucker, read it, enjoy it. It's just a fun fucking ride. And again, July 15th, Skin Deep, maybe the deepest, most visceral story of the series. What time will tell. But until then, Lucas Milliron, it has been a pleasure having you back on. Bizzong, catching up with you on all your work, and definitely looking forward to seeing your output in the days, weeks, months, years to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Frank, for having me on there. It has been awesome as always. And sorry if I get a little too personal with all this stuff. I mean, if people want to know more, just ask me. Some of this stuff's easier to talk on one-on-one with friends. That's all.
There he is, Zongers. Lucas Milliron, bringing you the 5th book in the fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell series, the flagship series of Godless.com. Comes from a very personal, touching space. It sounds very promising. I definitely am looking forward to it. I know we said a couple of times. I got it wrong. First of all, I said fucking Scumbags in Hell series. It's fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell. And both myself and Lucas, I think we both said early on in the interview, June 15th was the release. That is not the release. That is the release of Karen, the 4th book in the fucking Scumbags Burn in Hell series. Lucas's book, Skin Deep, will be out on July 15th, but you can check out the cover and get excited about it when you go over to Godless.com. It is there, just eagerly awaiting its release. And Zongers, I don't know who hasn't gotten on the Godless.com bandwagon yet, but I highly, highly recommend that you do. They are the new premier place to get your horror fiction, your weird, bizarre, crazy, over-the-top, extreme fiction. Sort of the book that launched the whole reason for Godless.com, Mother Maggot by Simon McCarty. They have the completely uncensored, the version that not even Smashwords dared to put up on their platform. You can get that on Godless.com. They're just a place for writers to share their uncensored work. I highly recommend that you go there and support the authors, because on top of being a great platform for sharing uncensored work, it's also a great platform that gives the power back to the writers there. You're supporting indie writers when you shop at Godless.com. But that's all I've got for you this week, you fine zongers and you godless heathens. But guess what, zongers? I'm going to be back, and I'm going to bring you way more cool-ass, weird and wacky fiction writers. And until then, you are now free to go and listen to these other great Project Entertainment Network podcasts.
This is Jim Adams from Monster Attack. Hey, if you remember that monster movie from your childhood that got it all started for you, the one that really got you interested in monster movies, horror movies, sci-fis, and cult films, then you're going to want to listen every week to Monster Attack. We look at some of our favorite monster movies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. With new episodes uploaded every Monday, it's Monster Attack, exclusively on the Project Entertainment Network.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay, host of the Unafraid podcast. On Unafraid, I share stories from the queer community that help us to grow, learn, and understand that while we are all different, there is an immeasurable beauty in that diversity. The Unafraid podcast is my labor of love, and I want to share that love with you. New stories are aired each week, so you can check out Unafraid on your podcast distributor right now.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.